What's up guys, it's Z here, welcome back to Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck of the Day, and it's finally time, the structured decks are here, we're trying now to make good god decks, and to be honest I think that Konami, even though they didn't give us much to work with, they gave us a really good way to splash them into decks, so this is the focus that we're going to take. We're not trying to make a dedicated god deck, I don't think that's possible. I mean, and if anyone of you can prove me wrong and send me a list that can focus around any one of the gods and the deck is not something else, then yeah, you can go ahead and do that, pretty please. But for now, we're going to make a decks for the gods. We're going to make a dedicated deck for each one of the gods, but first we're going to see a deck that has all three of the Egyptian god cards in, and I thought that the most fitting way to put them in a deck, it was to play them in Dark Magician, because come on, these are Yugi's cards. So yeah, I think that if we can play them in Dark Magicians, then that would be even more cool. And to be honest, I think Dark Magician is one of those decks that can really incorporate cards like this, because the support is very limited, but it does have a really good way of getting them on their hand or on the field, and you really need to play a kind of way in order to be able to do that. I'm going to explain why that is and why Dark Magician is really good at doing that. So before we begin with the video, if you enjoyed, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our upcoming videos. We're going to cover every single one of the gods, and now let's get to the deck profile. So starting off with the god cards, we have of course one copy of Slifer the Sky Dragon, one copy of Obelisk the Tormentor, and one copy of Winged Dragon of Ra. In this deck, you just need to play one of each. If you're playing a more dedicated list, then yes, I suggest playing at least two of them, maybe even three, but for this version, you just get the one you need. And since I'm not focusing on just one of them, I'm also not playing the dedicated attack spells that we got, the Thunder Force and Fist of Fate, and the cards that Ra had before, because it's not like you're going to see the one you need every single time, because if you sometimes you draw Slifer and then you have Fist of Fate in your hand, that's not going to work, so you need to be able to see the one if you want to play the spells. So for this build, I'm excluding these type of cards, but I'm also using another card that we got in the structure deck that I think is absolutely insane for the gods, and if you want to play them as a disruption, you can do that too. If you want to play them as going second beatdown edge, and that can work as well, you can do so much. So of course, these cards all have their utility. Slifer, I think, is the best one when you're trying to disrupt your opponent, because even if you don't have anything else afterwards, Slifer gives you some kind of disruption, because against a deck like Dragon Link, for example, that the Link monsters have to go in attack mode, obviously, and they're low attack points, cards like Romulus, Needle Fiber, LP and Pisty, Slifer just going to blow them up immediately, because they lose 2000 attack on summon, and if they hit 0, which they will because they're weak monsters, they're going to get destroyed. So this is why Slifer is a really good card if you try to make it summon it either going first or summon it during your opponent's turn to try to get more disruption. Obelisk, of course, is more of an offensive card, because you can use it to destroy your opponent's board, or you can just use it as a beatdown monster, because it always have 4000 attack points, unlike Slifer, which might have even less than 3000 sometimes. Obelisk's effect is not really the most optimal thing, because it prevents you from attacking, but it's the thing that it's untargetable, that your opponent cannot really deal with it when you're trying to attack with it, unless they have something like a Heavenly Spheres. But I don't think you're gonna try to play this deck against the highly competitive deck, so I'm not even sure if comparing a matchup like Dragon Link for this deck is even optimal, but maybe some people have the balls to do it and they actually want to play competitively and make the deck as competitive as possible, so maybe that can happen too. And Winged Dragon of Ra, unfortunately, cannot be special summoned, which is one of the other ways that you can get the Slifer and Obelisk on the field, but it's very possible to summon him with the other spell that you contribute your opponent's field to do it, and when you do that, you can either pay all your life points and to make him big, or you can just use his effect to start blowing up cards for every 1000 life points you pay, which I recommend doing the second one, because if you don't OTK after you use the first effect, then you're going to get blown away during the next turn with only 100 life points. So yeah, Ra has its uses too, and all three of them having all three on the deck feels so nostalgic, and I'm so glad that I can do this, especially in Dark Magicians. Speaking of Dark Magicians, we play of course 3 copies. I mean, if you play Dark Magicians, I don't think you have any reason to cut any copies. You just need to see the card, you need to have the card all times, so if you start banishing cards with Yugioh Era and stuff like that, or maybe if you banish one with Magical Ice Fusion, then you need a 3rd copy to be able to play. 1 copy of Red Eyes Black Dragon. We still have Dragoon, so we're going to use it, especially in Dark Magician, because this is where it was supposed to be, and having Red Eyes in the deck also makes the deck a little bit more nostalgic, because having a piece of joy in the deck as well makes it really, really cool. 1 copy of Dark Magician Magician Girl. The reason she's here for two main reasons. First of all, you cannot float from the Dark Magicians if you don't play her, so I still recommend playing this card because it gives you something more in order to go for a follow-up when your opponent tries to push through your board, and it also makes your Soul Servant a pot of greed, which I think during the late game just sent her with Magician Souls, or even during the early game, because sometimes you can send Dark Magician with Red Eyes Fusion and Anaconda to the grave, and then you can send Dark Magician Girl with Magician Souls, and then you already have both of them in the graveyard, so you can draw two with your Soul Servant. Two copies of Apprentice Illusion Magician. This card is decent because of Anaconda, because you need to get two monsters on the field. If we didn't have Dragoon, or if something gets banned, maybe Red Eyes Fusion or something like that, I'm not even sure if this card will be either worth playing, because I cut the Illusion Magic for this card. You don't really need Illusion Magic anymore, especially with this card, because you have so many ways to get to Dark Magician, especially in the graveyard. But still, if we don't have Dragoon, then I don't think that this card is really a good card, and maybe we can switch it around, but we'll have to wait for the ban list to see what happens. For the normal summon, we have 3 copies of Magician's Rod. Of course, this card searches you any of your spells and traps when it's summoned, and it recycles itself by tributing a spellcaster during your opponent's turn. And 3 copies of Magician Souls, because you need this card, absolutely. I know it's expensive, but it'll probably get a reprint really soon, so you don't really have to worry about that if you plan on playing the deck and you don't have the money to buy all the cards right now, because yes, the cards right now are really expensive, but we're waiting for King's Court to maybe we will see some reprints there, and even if they are not there, we're definitely going to get Legendary Duelist season really soon, so we'll be definitely there. Now for the spell cards, the first card is Exchanging Souls. So you need to max out on this card if you're playing any gods in any kind of deck, because this card is basically soul exchange from the anime. You just tribute your opponent's 3 monsters and you can use it as a quick play as well. It has just one downside. The way the turn you use it and the turn afterwards, you can only use one effect aside from the gods effects. But you don't really care too much, because let's say you have a Dragoon on the field. That's the only effect you're going to be using after using this, because you just need Slifer's effect to disrupt your opponents. So if you have just one negate, and yes, you cannot use Eternal Soul or Magician Navigation or something like that, but still the payoff for tributing 3 of your opponent's monsters and disrupting their combos and getting a really big monster on the field is really huge. I just wish this card was searchable, but unfortunately it's not. So this is why I was saying that Konami didn't really give us much to work with. The cards that we did get are good, but we didn't get many of them. We just got this card for any dedicated god deck. We got 1 attack of the gods for Fist of Fate and Thunder Force if you're playing Slifer, if you're playing Obelisk, but if you're not committing to just one of them, then I don't think these cards are really worth running, because they're going to create very awkward hands. But still, this card is a really good engine card and can be used offensively, can be used defensively. It's a really good card, and you can search any of the gods you want depending on the scenario. We have 3 copies of the True Name. This is the reason decks like Dark Magician can play the gods very consistently, because if you're relying on just summoning them by a normal way, it's very consistent. You cannot really do that unless you're playing a really spammy deck that can get 3 monsters on the field, but then again, you have to hard draw them in order to do that, so that's not the most optimal way. This card is the absolute best way to get them either in your hand for Exchanging Souls or straight out of the field, except draw, of course, because it's kind of a special summon. And how do you do that is you declare the card name of the top card of your deck, and if you get it right, you add that card to your hand, and then you either special summon or add to your hand a Divine Beast from your deck. So Dark Magician has so many ways to stack the top card of the deck. Of course, Dark Magician is not the only deck that can do that, but for more nostalgic purposes, I decided to do it in Dark Magician. I will show you other decks when it comes to Obelisk or Slifer, maybe. We'll see. You'll have to wait for that. But still, this card gives you so much advantage, because sometimes your hands in Dark Magicians were really awkward, so you could use Soul Servant and have nothing else. You don't have a way to get to that card because you don't have a Dark Magician in your grave or a Dark Magician Girl to be able to draw that card. But True Name gives you access to that card plus a God card, and of course sometimes you were going to use Circle and then maybe it would flop, but the top card of your deck would be something like a Magician Souls that you absolutely need to see, and True Name gives you access to that card. So it's not a bad card. I've seen people play this even before just playing with 1 Slifer, maybe 1 Obelisk and all the other support of the God cards, but this is a really good card, Dark Magician anyway, so it's not even a hindrance playing it, so it's really cool. 3 copies of Soul Servant. I think this is the best card in the deck by far, even better than Magician Souls. This card gives you so much advantage during the early game. It helps you get going, which is something the Dark Magician really has trouble with sometimes, and it also is really good top deck during the late game, because not only does it stack, but it also gives you a pot of grades. So yeah, this card is really good, and even if you draw multiples, it's a quick play, so you can just use it one during your own turn and set the other one, and during your opponent's turn stack the card you want to see, and then top deck a Magician Souls next turn and just blow them out this way. 3 copies of Dark Magical Circle. Of course, you have to max this out as well. I know it flops sometimes, but just the fact that you can stack your deck means that you have more access to the gods, and being able to stack your deck, even if it flops, you just get so much draw power with cards like Magician Souls and Soul Servant, and even now the True Name to get that card. So you just need the ability to be able to stack the top 3 cards of your deck in order to be able to go, so you don't really need to see a good card, you just need to see the card card that even if it's not searchable, that's going to help you get to the play. For the one-offs who play one copy of Secrets of Dark Magic, I really like this card, even though we have Magical Ice Fusion and maybe and we also have Red Ice Fusion, but I usually use this to summon the Dark Magicians. I really like going into Dark Magicians turn 1, maybe sometimes even more the Dragoon, depending on the hand. If I think that I have enough abilities to disrupt my opponent without Dragoon, then Dark Magicians is such a good card because it just gives you so much advantage. You can use it during your own turn, you can use it during your opponent's turn. If your opponent deals with it, then you just get more monsters on the field, and it's also another way to trigger Circle if you don't have your Soul Servant to get to your Eternal Soul. So yep, I really like this card, and I think it's a really great card because it's searchable with Magician's Rod. And for the other fusion spells, play of course one copy of Red Ice Fusion and one copy of Magical Ice Fusion. Red Ice Fusion, of course, with Dragoon, and Magical Ice Fusion can get you either your Dragoon or it can get you to Dark Magicians depending on what you need. I played 2 copies of Foolish Burial Goods because this card gives you basically Pot of Greed. When you draw this card late game, it will send your Soul Servant to the graveyard so you can draw 2 cards if you have both Dark Magician and DMG in the graveyard. But also during the early game, I do play the 1 copy of Metal Fusion we have right here, so you can send this Metal Fusion to the graveyard to be able to draw a card. So it unbricks you, which is similar to how Striker works back in the day, which you did have an engine that could put other cards that you need to the grave, but if you didn't really need to send anything else, that you can send your Metal Fusion, and drawing multiple copies or drawing Metal Fusion is not really that bad because you have Magician Souls, so you can send them to the grave to draw other cards, so you don't really break by drawing them, you just send them to the grave, and then you can get Magician Souls effect, and then get your Metal Fusion effect from the grave, so you get even more draws this way. For the trap cards, we have 2 copies of Eternal Soul. You don't really need to max this out because while this card, while it is a really good card and it's one of the win conditions of the deck, it's basically the lose condition of this deck because I can say that more than half of the games that I've been playing with Dark Magician, I lost them because someone blew this card up. So you have to be really careful with this card, and you can get access to it whenever you want. Even if both copies end up in the graveyard, Soul Servant can stack from the graveyard as well. So it's not like you've run out of them when they're both destroyed or banished or something like that. So you can get them whenever you want, and you don't really need them to get to Dark Magician on the field because of cards like Dark Magicians and Magician Souls. You can get Dark Magician on the field very easily. Then yes, during your opponent's turn not that much because your opponent will have to blow up your Dark Magicians in order to do that. But if you have Circle on the field, then yes, your opponent might not do that unless they already have a negate on the field. But still, you just playing 2 Eternal Soul is absolutely perfect. 1 copy of Navigation. The only reason this card is here is not even for its field effect. You hardly ever end the turn with a Dark Magician in your hand. In order to do that, you would have to play Illusion Magic, but I don't think it's worth playing because it's just an extra brick. You can get Dark Magician in the graveyard so easily with Red Ice Fusion and Anaconda that you don't really need to play this card. This card is here either to send with Foolish Burial Goods turn 1 or to have an extra interruption if you don't need to use Foolish Burial Goods for consistency purposes, or to discard it with your Magician Souls if you end up drawing it, to have it in the graveyard this way so you can get more interruption. It's a good one-off just because of the grave effect. If it didn't have the grave effect, I would not even consider playing this card. And 3 copies of Solemn Strike. This is basically a flex spot. You can play anything you want in here, but I felt like Solemn Strike was good enough because it's a really good card going second. You can play Solemn Judgment if you think that your opponent is going to blow you out with stuff like Lightning Storm or literally like that, but I think Strike is a really good card for at least for the main deck. If you want to play something more specific, then you can use a side deck for that. For the extra deck, we have Fusion Monsters. First, of course, we have 2 copies of Dark Dragoon. You need to play 2. You do play 2 copies of Anaconda, of course, in the extra deck as well, so you can use 1 with Red Ice Fusion, 1 with Magical Ice Fusion. Nobody's able to go do that. And yes, this card just wins games on its own. I mean, come on, it's Dragoon. As long as we have it, we're keep going to use it, of course. Especially, I think, even if you don't really like playing Dragoon in other decks, I think playing it Dark Magician makes it okay, just because it's in Dark Magician. 2 copies of Dark Magician. So sometimes I do go into 2 copies of this card, and I really like this card. I think it gives so much gas to the deck that Dragoon doesn't really do, because Dragoon, while yes, seems more powerful, if your opponent finds a way to deal with it, then you don't really have anything else to do afterwards. But this card, not only does it give you more cards, but it also floats into 2 monsters. So yeah, I mean, this card is really good, and if you don't have access to your Dark Magician girl turn 1 with Magician Souls, then this card can help you get to her so you can draw 2 cards with your Soul Servant. So yep, I really like this card. For the rank 7 monsters, we have of course 1 copy of Big Eye. These hardly ever come up, but sometimes they might, so it's fine having them in the extra deck just because you can get a lot of Dark Magicians on the field with your Eternal Soul. And 1 copy of Ebon Illusion Magician, because some scenarios you don't really need to steal a monster, you just need to clear away, so this card gives you more Dark Magicians on the field to trigger your Dark Magic Circle more times, so it's a really good card to have too. You can play other cards, you can play Dracosack maybe to get more tokens to go into link plays, but I don't think that's necessary. For the link monsters, we have 1 copy of Imdak. You need this in order to go for your secrets, in order to summon Dragoon. Well, yes, you can summon Dragoon without Red Eyes, because if you have like Dark Magician field and then you can use it for this and then bring it back with Eternal Soul, then you can use secrets to go into your Dragoon. So yep, you have it just just to get to a dragon play so you can get Dragoon more consistently. 1 copy of Anima because Souls is level 1. 1 copy of Link Spider, just another monster that would help you get Dark Magician off the field so you can get it back on the field to be able to trigger Circle one more time. 2 copies of Anaconda because we do play 2 cards, and even if the one gets stopped and you don't really get to send Red Eyes to the grave, you just use Magicalized Fusion after you send your Imp deck to the grave, so it's not really very difficult to summon your Dragoon during the late game, even if your first Anaconda got stopped. 1 copy of Masquerena. This is another way to get more disruption, because when you get a lot of Dark Magicians to the field, you feel the need to get them off the field so you can bring them back, and then when you do that, you can also use Masquerena on top of it to be able to use Circle during your opponent's turn, and then go into a Unicorn with the Dark Magician you brought back. And I play the Nightmares, 1 Cerberus, 1 Phoenix, and 1 Unicorn. I mean, this is pretty standard. I don't play any Link 4s in the deck. I don't think you ever get to the point of having that many monsters on the field unless your Anaconda somehow survived a turn, even if you summon Dragoon or not, but that's hardly ever gonna happen, so I don't think you don't really need them anyway. They don't offer anything that the deck doesn't really do. So yep, that's the deck, guys. The God cards finally have even more support, and even though I still think that we could have gotten more cards, but Konami said otherwise, we're still gonna use the cards we got, and we're still gonna splash them in a lot of decks, and I know that there are so many decks that could potentially use cards like this. So yeah, I'm welcome for guys to be able to surprise me in the comments of what kind of decks you have come up with that you can play any of the gods. So yeah, we can test them out. We can even make more deck profiles, because I know these cards are almost as iconic as Dark Magician and Blue Eyes for the show. For some people, maybe even more iconic. So yeah, a lot of people love them, and a lot of people are going to use them. So yeah, let's have a discussion down and see what other decks or techs we can come up with to make these cards even better. So yeah, that's it, guys. If you enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss upcoming videos, and we'll see you next time.